Okay, good afternoon all. As I've only got 30 minutes to share this presentation, I've tailored it in a general overview with some key takeaways for your perusal today. Obviously, we do more detailed training at a club compliance level in the fullness of time, and this is normally done in June or July. So there's more detail to follow for your allocated compliance officers. I'm going to do this in a slightly different way today. I'm just going to pick up on the Oxford English Dictionary sort of meaning of the word compliance. And the more I read this, the more concerned I got. You can see obedience, conformity, they're all really heavy words. And if you look at the opposite meanings, you get no better input in terms of defiance and disobedience. So I think from a personal point of view, the choice of words do subdue awareness and perhaps discourage the needs to understand the significance of compliance to Rotary. From an RGBI perspective, compliance is viewed by some as an unnecessary chore that can be ignored. That's getting better, but it's still a very vulnerable area. I think in our district, 1150, we're very much on the right path of engagement. So we need to take those definitions and sort of translate them into agreement and concurrence, and continue to create a productive environment where we can generate more commitment to our obligations to Rotary. One of the key things I talk about is listening, learning, sharing, and adapting good guidance practice that's available to us. And it's all about really, at the end of the day, protecting the Rotarians in the public activities they pursue, also protecting the people that we engage with, that's the public. And as importantly, by following the guidances that Rotary set out, it does in actual fact protect the image of Rotary. So compliance at a high level is segmented into 5 categories, and these are health and safety, safeguarding, general data protection legislation, affectionately known as GDPR, equality, diversity, and inclusion, and now we've added equity to that as well, which is all about, as I said to the team before you joined, it's about treating yourself the way that, or other people the way you treat yourself. So it kind of summarizes in that fashion. And the other one that's appeared on the horizon over the last 2 years is dispute management. There appears to be quite a lot of issues that are being generated of disagreement and so forth at club level and so forth. So we've actually put in a section here for managing those disagreements. If we look at how often we're likely to encounter these expectations, then on health and safety, it has to feature when you conduct any Rotary event. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail. Safeguarding is about Rotarian activities with vulnerable people, i.e. basically definition of children and elderly people. The GDPR is really entirely up to club how they manage this, but we would recommend that you look at your information that you hold on an annual basis or by an agreed frequency, and then obviously take steps to make sure that it's up to date and you don't have any information that is really not necessary to hold. The EDI and E is all about people's personal or group interactions. So this would be anytime you have a club meeting, a council meeting, it's the way that you behave in a group of people to make sure, as I said, you treat others the way that you'd like to be treated yourself. And then obviously this dispute management, which is a recent addition, is hopefully going to be very infrequently or as and when required. So how are we structured to meet our protection needs in 1150 today? About 2 years ago, before we started an initiative, this typically was the reality that we confronted. We'd have, for example, Club A would just have an officer in health and safety and maybe an officer in EDI. Club B might have an officer in health and safety and one in safeguarding, or Club C, and there is still a couple in our district that conduct themselves there. They only have an officer in the EDI section. So what we're trying to do, and we started this last year with Ray's Bevan's district governor year, what we're looking to do is to have a nominated compliance officer at club level as a single point of contact and integration of the above to the district organisation and RGBI. The club, if it wishes, can allocate individual duties along the 5 indicated there under the compliance officer, but we're trying to get is a one-stop shop where we can not only communicate to the club on compliance requirements, but also the club has an opportunity of generating a backup system in order to get answers that they require. So what we're trying to do, and I think we were successful last year in getting, of the 57 clubs, just under 40 of them nominating a compliance officer. So we'll continue to move along that route, and hopefully those that don't will actually be in a situation to follow this route that we're taking. As I said, I don't have much time this morning, but I am going to try and expand on the 2 critical areas of health and safety and safeguarding, as these probably would feature most prominently in the Rotary activities that you undertake. Health and safety, and I've put in the top left-hand corner, risk assessments is the currency of health and safety. Risk assessments are all about making sure that the areas and the people that you come in contact with, that you do enough homework up front to make sure that you minimize the opportunity of having an accident. Now, what is interesting, a lot of people that who are in Rotary today have actually had a role in the safety environment, and they are very much aware of what risk assessments are about, okay? So in the top left-hand corner, let's not reinvent the wheel. There may be a club person or member that has done this before. It's not a rocket science, but it makes a lot of sense if we can utilize the experience of certain people to help drive this forward. So the first step is all about risk identification. It's literally walking through everything that you plan to do and try and understand where you believe there are risks. You then undertake a risk assessment. In other words, you're going to categorize the level of the risk that you're measuring. And then thirdly, you look at ways of mitigating that risk, if not eliminating it, okay? But in many cases that, you can do the best you can, but there still remains a level of risk to the public or to the Rotarians. Sometimes, and this is interesting, that this happened in a couple of clubs recently, they've started the risk assessment and then they've gone away and had some further thought about it and come back with an alternative way of doing things. So doing something about it is a great opportunity to reduce the level of expectations in terms of risk to the people involved. And then the document, when you complete it, it is rather important to share it, because it's not for the person that's actually undertaken the risk assessment, but it's to share it with as many people as you can, so that everybody's aware of the implications of the event that you're undertaking. This is the risk assessment form, and I'll show you later where to find this. It's not as overpowering and difficult as you can imagine. One of the ideas I've got moving forward with the detailed training is maybe to have a test case done for you, so you can actually see and understand how it's structured and how you actually load all the information into it. That's available online, and I'll show you where to get that in a few moments. So the key messages on risk assessment is it is better to have several sets of eyes associated with this, because the more people that are involved, the more likelihood you are of picking up an issue. It is essential that every Rotarian who is involved in the event is aware and has read a copy of the risk assessment. and it makes good sense to post one in a prominent position at the event so the public can see it as well. This third point has been driven very much by COVID over the last couple of years, but it makes good sense. If you have an outdoor event in a public place, then discussing or consulting your local authority when the events are taking place and showing them the risk assessment and getting them to endorse it is a big plus in terms of the insurance are involved and underwrite the whole process. And I'm afraid to say that if you don't have a risk assessment or can demonstrate that an effort has been made to produce a risk assessment, there is no underlying insurance. And if issues arise based on no risk assessment, then the club and the club president particularly would be involved with the consequential damages of the issues arising from that. So again, no risk assessment, don't expect any insurance. Okay, just quickly moving on to safeguarding. This is all about measuring the frequency and time of contact you're likely to have with a vulnerable person. And that is called regulated activity. So certain roles like schools and care homes and so forth, where you get involved with children and vulnerable adults, need to have a measurement of the regulated activity. Anyone who is on the disclosure and barring services barred list cannot work in these roles. Therefore, these organisations, when they recruit people, must make sure that enhanced DBS checks are undertaken to make sure there's no potential hazard or issue as far as the people that they're dealing with. Regulated activities are eligible for enhanced DBS checks, as I said, with children or adults on the barring list. They reveal whether really a person has committed a criminal activity, so they basically get a clean sheet of no previous issues with respect to working with the children and the vulnerable adults. The government guidelines are very specific about work activities that are regulated and that require an enhanced DBS check. And really, you can actually see these in action if you go to the little website I've shown you below there. You can actually type in the sort of activity you're planning to do, and it'll tell you whether an enhanced DBS is required or not. So it's quite a nice little tool. It's very user-friendly. But at the end of the day, if there's any doubt about that, obviously you can come back to myself for conformance to that. I've pulled this little example out, which we did last year in the compliance training. A lot of our Rotarians get involved with school activities, sometimes known as volunteers. Couple of key points here. If the organising body is not identifying the need for a Rotarian working in that location to have a DBS check, then our recommendation is that the Rotarian should work in pairs, preferably a man and a woman, and if it's possible, get the input of a member of staff as well. So it's kind of belt and braces, but work in pairs or work in pairs with a teacher if you're working with the children. A Rotarian may insist, and I've had a couple of examples of this, to have a DBS check done, but that would be if the environment is not asking for this to be done and it doesn't warrant it, then that DBS check would be a personal action and cost. As I said, legally you cannot get a DBS if it's not warranted by the circumstances you're working in. The second scenario is, and this comes up on a fairly regular basis in a couple of our districts in the UK. An organising body needs a DBS for you to undertake activities at that school or location, as it fits the criteria through the regulated activities to have one. They may undertake the action and cost to do so. I mean, what it basically means is that you are giving of your time, giving of your support, and quite a number of schools, when they require a DBS, will actually provide that at their own cost. Alternatively, if the organising body won't provide this support, then the Rotarian will need to raise paperwork, which obviously is generated through the club compliance officer. And there's quite an intrinsic, complicated DBS process that follows this. And in fact, RGBI is reviewing this process at this moment in time, and I'm attending a course in a couple of weeks' time to see what the outcome of this is. The bottom line, as I read it, is that you have to have a very, very good reason to have an enhanced DBS, because that is really all that RGBI will do, is give you an enhanced DBS. And then it's important that you record this and it's kept and reviewed and replaced appropriately in the time periods expected. So in summarizing this slide, if you don't need one, work as pairs. If you do need one, ask if the organising body will undertake the cost to do so, because it recognises the commitment and effort you're putting in to undertake that duty. If it's not going to provide that and you do need an enhanced DBS, then obviously work through your compliance officer, and then he'll work through me and we'll get one of these generated for you. If we look at insurance, who are the key players? Bartlett is the broker. I find them really, really helpful when I ring them up, and they're underwritten by Aviva, who is the insurer. If you have activities proceeding in terms of your activities in the environment, then you have to complete a risk assessment and maintain that through reassessment. So, for example, if you have an annual event in a park, like an Easter egg thing, then obviously you will complete the risk assessment. And then when you come to do it again, just make sure you reassess the validity of that particular piece of work that you've previously done. There is an insurance guide on the Rotary website, which I'll show you where to access that in a minute, for all events. But some of them are not covered by insurance. The areas that are more prevalent to involvement of Bartlett's would be fireworks and hired equipment, because over the last 10 years, there have been instances in the UK where some severe consequential issues have been developed through the events involving fireworks and hired equipment. If you may recall reading about the little inflatable castle that was in London a few years ago. Bartlett's, as I say, are extremely supportive, and they're full of advice. And if that particular event isn't listed, or you want to consult with me, we can also engage Bartlett's, and they will advise you what's required to produce insurance for that particular event. An interesting point is that we have to be careful using images from any website which has licensing or registered copyright, as this would also nullify insurance in the case that that's picked up. Today, Rotary has negotiated a 20 million cover for public product and employers' liability. And lastly, claims due to tangible negligence fall into both common and statutory law. Again, I've got an extra slide on this, but if anybody's interested in seeing the difference between common and statutory law, we can go through it separately. I don't apologize for putting this back up again. If you don't have a risk assessment, the insurance company will not be involved, and the implications of anything happening as a result of that no risk assessment falls very much on the club and the president leading the club during that year. So where do you go to get help and support? Obviously myself, we've in RGBI have just appointed a new compliance coordinator, Rebecca Warner. She's really is a smart cookie. And she's replaced Tina Howard, who's been doing that job for many years. And my Rotary website, again, I'm surprised that the number of people that aren't aware of what's available on the My Rotary website. But if you're looking at compliance, you can see, if you get onto the My Rotary website, go in the members section, then the club and district support area, and click on compliance, you can see that the areas that I've discussed this morning will flow up, and then you can actually go down and pick out anything that you need or any forms that you need. But again, if people are unsure, then come and let me know, and we can work through it together. So what are our expectations of what we take away today? I would say there are 3 of them from my perspective. Hopefully you've had a better high-level understanding of what's involved with the compliance culture, and why it's important to protect us as Rotarians, the public we interface with, and the need to safeguard the Rotary image. I would not like anybody to feel isolated or fearful of the actions required or the forms involved to protect the event that you're getting involved with or planning. Help is always at hand, and I'm more than happy at any time to support your compliance officer or anybody that's involved with those activities. And lastly, this is the way we're moving forward in 1150, and it is regarded as one of the districts in the UK that is more advanced on this, is to nominate a compliance officer per club to own and manage these requirements. It keeps the communication structure simple. It allows us to answer questions much easier, and allows those people to have a knowledgeable engagement of the toolbox that's available to them on compliance at club level. And that is the end of my presentation.